They killed him. They actually killed him. And nobody is talking about what really happened inside that ring at WrestleMania 42. Brock Lesnar, the most physically terrifying human being to ever lace up a pair of boots in WWE history, a man who has conquered UFC champions, eaten F5D legends for breakfast, and laughed in the face of every so-called monster this industry has thrown at him, walked into that Philadelphia stadium on his feet, and was carried out of professional wrestling forever by a 24-year-old. And if you're not furious right now, if your blood isn't boiling, then you clearly didn't watch what I watched. Because what Obafimi did to Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 42 wasn't just a victory, it was an execution. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, your entire perception of what WWE is capable of in 2026 is going to be shattered, and you are going to need to share this with someone who wasn't watching. Segment 1, setting the stage: the beast that wouldn't die. Let's rewind. Let's go back to the weeks before WrestleMania 42 and understand exactly how impossible this matchup was supposed to feel on paper. Because you have to appreciate what Brock Lesnar meant before you can understand what losing him means. Brock Lesnar is not a wrestler. He is a phenomenon. A once-in-a-generation physical specimen who debuted in WWE in 2002 and immediately looked like something God assembled in a back room when nobody else was around. He won the WWE Championship in his first year. He conquered The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, a moment so seismic that half the arena sat in stunned silence because their brains couldn't process what their eyes had just witnessed. He's beaten John Cena. He's beaten Triple H. He's beaten Roman Reigns. He's beaten Seth Rollins, Bobby Lashley, Drew McIntyre. He came back from a real UFC run and re-entered WWE like nothing had changed. Brock Lesnar doesn't have peaks and valleys, he is the mountain. So when Obafimi's music hit on Raw and he got into a confrontation with Lesnar 3 weeks before WrestleMania, most of the wrestling world did the same thing. They laughed. Not because Obafimi isn't impressive, because he is, and we'll get to just how impressive in a moment, but because the idea of any newcomer stepping into that ring with Brock Lesnar and walking away the victor felt like science fiction. It felt like sending a lit match into a hurricane and expecting the match to win. The betting lines had Lesnar as a massive favorite. The fan forums were mocking the matchup. The discourse was almost entirely about how Lesnar would win, not whether he would. Some people thought it would be a squash. Some thought Obafimi would get a strong showing before taking an F5 and being handed a consolation loss that would still elevate him. Nobody, and I mean nobody outside of WWE's inner creative circle, saw what was actually coming. Segment 2, who is Obafimi and why you should have been scared already. Now let's talk about the man who did the impossible. Because if you've been sleeping on Obafimi, this is your wake-up call, and it is blaring. Obafimi is Nigerian-Canadian. Born in Lagos, raised in Toronto. He played college football before transitioning to professional wrestling, and from the very first moment he stepped into a developmental ring, coaches were losing their minds. Not in the way they do about most prospects, in the way they do about the rare ones. The ones they pull each other aside for and say, "Come watch this kid. You need to see this." Standing at 6'5" and weighing in at 290 pounds of almost entirely fast-twitch muscle, Obafimi moves with a fluidity that his body has absolutely no business possessing. He doesn't lurch. He doesn't plod. He glides. He was NXT North American Champion and turned the title reign into a showcase of every single tool in his toolkit: power, speed, ring psychology, presence, and an intensity behind his eyes that makes you uncomfortable in the best possible way. By the time he was called up to the main roster, the whispers had turned into full-volume conversations. People within WWE were comparing him to a young Lesnar himself, which, honestly, felt premature. Felt like hyperbole. Until WrestleMania 42 made those comparisons look conservative. The build to the match was short but devastating in its effectiveness. Femi called Lesnar out. Not with clever wordplay, not with scripted corporate catchphrases, with genuine menace. He looked down that camera barrel and told the world that Brock Lesnar was the final obstacle between him and immortality, and that he had been preparing for this obstacle his entire life. Lesnar responded the way Lesnar always does, with barely contained violence. Their first face-to-face on Raw ended with two security teams physically separating them after Lesnar got his hands on Femi, and Femi, crucially, significantly did not go down. He absorbed Lesnar's initial grab, stabilized, and stared at him, and the crowd lost their mind. That moment should have been everyone's warning sign. Segment 3, WrestleMania 42, the match, minute by minute in feeling. Now, the match itself. WrestleMania 42. Philadelphia's Lincoln Financial Field. 70,000 plus fans packed into that stadium. The electricity was unlike anything I've felt watching a WrestleMania in years, and I mean that with every bone in my body. When Brock Lesnar's music hit, the reaction was what it always is: a wall of sound, primal and enormous. He walked down that ramp with Paul Heyman doing his Heyman thing, and the aura around Lesnar was exactly what it's always been: inevitable, unconquerable, a force of nature dressed in a black trunks. Then Obafimi's music hit. And something shifted in that stadium. The reception was massive. This wasn't polite appreciation. This wasn't a respectful hand for a talented up-and-comer. This was 70,000 people standing up because they felt something. There was an electricity specific to Femi's entrance that I haven't been able to stop thinking about since. He walked to that ring not like a challenger. He walked like someone who already knew the outcome and had come to collect. The match started with Lesnar doing what Lesnar does immediately, trying to take Femi down, trying to impose his wrestling background, trying to make the match ugly and physical and raw. And for the first 4 or 5 minutes, it worked. Lesnar was dominant. He threw Femi with German suplexes. He grounded him. He worked the ribs. He did everything right, and the Philadelphia crowd was beginning to settle into the familiar Brock Lesnar WrestleMania experience, awe-inspiring violence delivered efficiently. But here's where everything changed. Here's the moment that WrestleMania 42 became something historic. Brock went for the F5. He hoisted Femi. The crowd was on their feet because they knew what came next, or they thought they did. And Obafimi, mid-rotation, mid-air, shifted his weight. He landed on his feet. His feet. Behind Lesnar. 290 pounds of pure athletic freakishness landing cleanly behind the Beast Incarnate like it was a trained reflex. And before Brock could process what had just happened, Femi hit him with a lariat that nearly took his head off. The stadium went nuclear. What followed was a 12-minute stretch of professional wrestling that I will argue to my last breath belongs in conversation with the greatest WrestleMania matches ever contested. Not because of high-flying gymnastics or intricate submission chains, but because of story. Because Femi systematically dismantled the Beast. He absorbed punishment that would have folded anyone else and came back angrier. He hit a powerbomb on Brock Lesnar that shook the ring so hard the cameras shook. He hit it again. He picked Lesnar up one final time and drove him into the canvas with a ferocity that felt almost personal. The crowd was on its feet, screaming, some people in tears, some people just standing with their mouths open. 1, 2, 3, silence. Then the eruption. Then the realization. Segment 4, the retirement. The moment nobody was ready for. Here's where I need you to stay with me. Because this is the part that broke the internet and broke a lot of hearts simultaneously. After the match, after Obafimi had his moment, after the confetti and the pyro and the new era energy filling that stadium, Brock Lesnar took the microphone. Paul Heyman stood beside him, visibly emotional in a way that Heyman almost never allows himself to be publicly. And Brock Lesnar, a man whose entire brand is built on silence and violence, spoke. He said, and I am being careful with his words here, that he had been in this business for over 2 decades, that he had conquered every mountain there was to climb, that he had held every title, beaten every name, survived every war. And then he said that Obafimi had shown him something tonight that he hadn't felt in a very long time, and that was the feeling of being genuinely, physically, completely beaten. Not by a cheap shot. Not by interference. Not by politics or storyline mechanics. Beaten by someone who was simply, on that night, in that ring, better. He said he was done. No ambiguity. No I'll be back. No wink to the camera. Done. The crowd didn't know how to react for a full 4 or 5 seconds. Then they gave him something you almost never hear directed at a villain-run character in WWE: genuine, heartfelt appreciation. A standing ovation that went on and on and on. Lesnar stood in that ring and soaked it in, and then he walked up that ramp one final time and disappeared behind the curtain. The Beast Incarnate. Gone. Retired by a 24-year-old force of nature who just announced himself as the most terrifying new presence in WWE. Segment 5, what this means, the bigger picture. Let me be very direct with you, because this is the part of the video that I think will generate the most debate in the comments, and I want that debate. I need that debate, because I think the wrestling world is severely underreacting to what just happened. Obafimi retiring Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 42 is the most significant passing of the torch in WWE since Roman Reigns became the tribal chief. Actually, and I'll die on this hill, it might be bigger. Because Lesnar's aura was more protected than Roman's ever was. Roman had losses sprinkled throughout his career before the Bloodline era. Brock Lesnar's losses were events. They were rare enough to feel seismic every single time. And Femi didn't just beat him. He retired him. He ended the chapter. He closed the book. The page is turned. And now WWE has to ask itself what comes next, and what comes next is a young, hungry, physically unprecedented talent standing at the top of the mountain with zero ceiling above him. The era of Brock Lesnar is over. The era of Obafimi has begun. And if WWE plays this correctly, if they build this the right way, give Femi the booking and the storylines and the opponents he deserves, we could be watching the birth of the next decade-defining WWE superstar. Outro call to action, hot and direct. I need to know what you think right now. Do you believe Obafimi is the real deal? Do you think Brock Lesnar's retirement is legitimate, or do you smell a return angle coming? Do you think WWE made the right call putting this on the WrestleMania stage? Comment below.